Right, thank you. The other important thing to think about when you're planning is to think about the colour scheme that you're going to have in your garden. Although we're always very tempted with colour and want to go out and buy one of everything, it works much better if you can choose things that are harmonious. And that means in theory, art theory terms, they come from the same side of the colour wheel. So if you look at the colour wheel like at 7 o'clock, you can see that it's got the cool colours, what's known as the cool colours. So this is blue, green, lime green, going into soft yellows, and those are considered to be cool colours. And then opposite those, if you look on the other side, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there are your hot colours, reds, oranges, and yellows. And what happens is, if you'll see it in a minute, there's some examples of lovely colour schemes that Belinda's put together. If you want to provide a bit of drama and contrast, what you do is have plants from the cool side of the colour wheel, and then you pick something dramatic opposite it, like the reds, and they will provide a real contrast. And similarly with your other colour scheme, you might have purple and blue, and opposite that you've got your yellow and orange. And then this is how it works when you go into practice. You'll see some examples in a second. The one little note at the bottom, whites and creams, they just give an accent of coolness to the colour. So here's an example of a colour scheme. Where are we now? I've lost my set. What number are we on? I can't see my slide.
This is number 5.
It's number 5. Oh, sorry. Right. This is a good example of using colours on the opposite side of the colour wheel. So you can see purple contrasting with orange, blue with orange, blue with yellow. In fact, in actual theory, it's purple is opposite yellow and blue is opposite orange. But you can see how they work together, providing a real contrast. If you look at this top left-hand corner, you've got a lovely orangey Rudbeckia, and then look how it contrasts with that lime green of the Kniphofia. And because you've got green in the garden all the time, because almost all of the leaves are green, they are going to always contrast with your reds and oranges. Next, please. This is a lovely example of a red colour scheme, and because all the leaves in the garden are already green, they provide a beautiful contrast. Particularly notice the euphorbia, the top right hand corner, is a lovely lime green, and look how that contrasts with those what look like monadas to me. And then on the top left hand side, that looks like Alchemilla mollis, which is a lovely perennial that flowers and flowers with these beautiful lime green flowers, and look how that contrasts with that hot red and pink rose. That looks lovely. So they're a good example of colour schemes. And then the next slide shows you a cool colour scheme. Can you see the difference now? You've gone from hot colours to cool colours. And here we've got mauves and soft greys, lovely wispy grasses, a little bit of white and cream in here, and that all keeps the whole thing very, very cool.
It's your moon garden, Julia.
It is. I haven't quite got there yet, Belinda. I mean, sorry, Chrissy. We'll get there in a minute. There are some examples. There's lots of examples in this section. Can we move on, Belinda? Taking a while to come up, aren't they, the slides?
They do sometimes, yeah. So have you got the collage now?
Collage now. This is a collage made by Rosamond. Can you remember Rosamond? Do you remember it? I can't hear her. She's still there. Anyway, Rosamond made this collage when we were working on the moon garden. She and I did the moon garden, assisted by, I mean, rather under the control of, I've forgotten her name now. Yvonne, sorry. Yes, Yvonne did the original designs for these gardens, and then she took us on as students to learn how to do garden design. And she did suggest that we made a collage, and Rosamond made this one. And actually, just cutting pictures out of it could be magazines or it could be online. There are masses and masses of examples of nurseries that have their flowers, and you can just cut the pictures out and stick them into a collage. So if you were planning an area of garden, and I would suggest you don't plan your whole garden in one colour scheme, but have little areas. So this could be your cool area. And then you could have another section of the garden that gets very, very hot in the summer that you want to be your hot bit, your hot section. So in actual fact, it's rather interesting for me to look at these photographs, because I think that every picture in this collage is actually in that garden. It's very interesting, actually, how it all came together. The only thing we didn't have were the standard roses. We did rather want them, but the budget wouldn't quite allow, I'm afraid. So what we did was we eventually got our way and we bought some small shrub roses, and those are there, but you'll see in a minute, they don't quite provide the height. Next, please. Now this is the moon garden, and I haven't got the caption, so have you got the caption, Melinda? Tells you when this picture was taken, summer 2000.
Oh, it was 2019.
2019. Yeah, I can just actually see a couple of the white roses, but they're still at very early stages because they take a long while to really establish and get tall. But it would have been lovely to have standard roses there. They would have given the height, and then we could have worked around them with some of our plants. But this is a very good example. When Yvonne originally designed the garden, she thought of the idea of the sun and the moon, and the moon were going to be all cool colours, and the sun garden was going to be all hot colours. And it has proved to be extremely successful. We've got tall things in the middle. There's a pergola thing here with a sort of flowering cherry. And we've got the tall plants nearest to that, and then gradually working out until as you get to the edges, you'll see very, very low plants, even so low that you can just sort of step over them to get to the garden. Next, please.
I should just say for those of our newer members that this garden, the moon garden and the sun garden, these are at our local Maison de Retraite in Lauzerte, where they asked us to take care of one of the gardens, and we started with absolutely nothing. So it's been a fantastic project for the club, and we volunteer to go there once or twice a week. Two of us go through the spring and summer to look after it.
And it's a very lovely way of sharing your garden experience, because you can go with having very little garden experience and say, what can I do? And somebody says, well, could you just trim that back a bit, please, or something? And that work really, really works. Or could you do that? That's a weed, that isn't a weed. Could you weed out all of those? And we all learn from each other. So this is a close-up of the moon garden, and you can see how beautifully these soft colours all blend together. And then there are a few contrasts. I've been trying over the last few years to get more blue into it, because sometimes it's a bit lacking in, if you like, our coolest colour. There's a lovely pale lemon, Hemerocallis. So the pale lemons work beautifully in that colour scheme. And then there's a lovely blue top middle slide picture, and that shows our hebe. I've forgotten about the hebes. I only ever seem to see them when they're not flowering, but they're an evergreen shrub. So they provide colour and texture the whole year. And then this is in flower, in full flower, and there are 4 of them. So that is a lovely shrub. Right, next one. Now we're going to embarrass Chrissy in a minute.
Yeah.
I think this is your bottom, isn't it, Chrissy?
Is that me?
Yes, it is. Sorry about that. It's only because we were actually rather short of photographs, because I had a disastrous crash on my computer last year, and I think I've lost all the pictures I've ever taken of the Maison de Retraite garden. But anyway, this is a very good example of the sun garden, and it is work in progress. You can see bare patches. In the moon garden, there are never bare patches, because there are some large shrubs like this Phygalius at the bottom of the pergola here, and they were so enormous in the end. David and Louise decided that they would remove them, and so in the case of while they were removing them, they then had to try and find other things to replace them. So that is work in progress, but you see how those hot colours all work together. Next, please. there's an example of close-ups of the plants in the garden. And you see, once you start to home in and look at the plants, you can see how the colours all work really, really well together. It's interesting, actually, because I might not have thought of this, but Yvonne chose this geranium, which is called Roseanne, which is a lovely, very, very long flowering geranium. It lasts for absolutely ages. And that one contrasts beautifully with all the hot colours. It provides a little bit of a calm, if you like, against all that heat. And amazingly, those heucheras at the bottom right-hand side are still thriving. I don't quite know how, because it's too hot for them there, but they seem to be battling on. Next, please.
Okay, I think that's the
end
of that little section. So
draw breath now.
I think probably when I put the notes together, it would be good to have your comments on which plants we're showing in some cases, because these are what we're learning at the Maison de Retraite is the plants that do quite well without too much intervention, and hopefully those that survive both in very hot and slightly cooler conditions, because the moon garden gets a lot more shade than the sun garden does.